Monday afternoon to you, 4 o'clock time for Sports4CLE. Thanks for joining us. Hope your week is off to a good start. Browns will get training camp underway in a few days out at the Greenbrier. Today, rookies, quarterbacks, and some of the banged-up, injured players reported to Berea. In advance of that, also over the weekend, Nick Chubb posted a little bit of a video getting ready for training camp.
It's different now because I feel like I'm behind. Usually I'm healthy and I'm working to get faster and stronger. Now I'm just trying to catch up to get to, the person I once was.
Let's welcome in Scott Petrak, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram as well as BrownZone.com. And Scott, we'll get to the article that you wrote, just issues that the Browns have to work through in training camp in just a minute. Nick Chubb, we've seen him squat and we've seen him doing lateral work. It's kind of interesting. We'll see what the Browns do with him. That's going to be really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, I expect him to start camp on the PUP list, right? There's no reason to rush him. He's coming off severe damage to the knee, multiple surgeries. He's had that knee operated on before. So there's no need to rush him, but it's got to be encouraging for fans. When we talked to Nick in June, which is the first time we talked to him since the injury September 18th, he wouldn't commit to a date when he'd practice. He wouldn't commit to a goal for, a return to games. But then you see the lateral movement, the squatting, like you mentioned, the video, and it's all really encouraging. I think they're positive steps toward him trying to get back to who he was. Right now, that remains a huge question mark. It's different to squat and to run than it is to play football, but it feels like he's on the right track, and it's just a matter of time. But I wouldn't expect him to practice early in camp, and I would still think, to me, October feels like a realistic time for when he might be able to play again.
Yeah, and again, he's been through this. He knows that, there are certain things that will create cause for concern. So that's why I think he doesn't want to put a date on it because he doesn't want to feel like it's a setback if he can't be there. So you wrote an article, training camp preview, 5 issues to watch. First one, we kind of alluded to it, Nick Chubb's health. Second one, will Amari Cooper show up? Third one, new look offense under Ken Dorsey. Fourth one, Deshaun Watson enters a pivotal season. And the health of Jack Conklin, Jedrick Wills, and Nyheim Hines. So we've talked a little bit about the health of Chubb. Cooper's an interesting one.
Yeah, he's supposed to report with the veterans tomorrow. We'll see if he does. We'll see if he does. Let's assume there's no new contract, right? If the new contract, he gets an extension, whatever it is, and that satisfies him, then he's good to go. Things should be fine. Let's assume that doesn't happen in the next 24 hours. Does he report? If he reports, does he practice? Or does he just show up and not get fined, kind of like it sounds like Jordan Love's doing in Green Bay? Now, I don't know the exact rules of that. Can anybody just show up and not practice? That seems like it goes against your contract too, unless there's an injury or you're close, right? Maybe they're close to a deal and this is okay, like a good faith gesture, I'm going to show up. But there's a lot of unanswered questions. It's a huge deal. Amari Cooper's their number one target in the passing game, respected leader, 5-time Pro Bowler. So, I think Browns fans are hoping something gets done in a hurry, and maybe it does. But I think there is the possibility for this to get sticky, for this situation to drag on and become a distraction during training camp.
Yeah. We haven't really had that with Andrew Berry. They've usually found a way to get through things, so we'll see how that works out. New look offense under Ken Dorsey. Am I making too much of – if you bring in a whole new staff, doesn't it stand to realize the offense will look a little different?
Oh, yeah. I think there's no doubt it's going to look at least a little different, right? The question to me is just how much. And, there's multiple layers to this. Kevin Stefanski's been a play-action pass run guy, right? And we've seen the Browns rank at or near the top in rushing attempts throughout Stefanski's 4 years. Now, how much does that shift? We know it's going to be more spread. We know we're going to see more 3 and 4 receiver sets. does that mean a big uptick in passing? Like, does the percentage go from, let's say, 55-45 to 60-40 or whatever those numbers are? Or is it just when they pass or even when they run, it just looks different? It's more out of the shotgun. It's more out of spread. And you can do that. You can run out of those. You see it in college all the time. You see it some in the pros. So I think that's the first question. How much do they throw versus pass? And then does it look a lot different when we talk about the formations in the passing game? I assume more shotgun. I assume, like I mentioned, more 3 and 4 receiver sets. But is it really noticeable? Like, does the average fan pick it up when I'm watching training camp practice? Does it jump out at me versus they used to do a lot of the 2 tight end sets, right? They were more compact formations. Is it going to look that much different? And then obviously you have the option routes that receivers are going to run. Not that they never did in the past, but we're certainly going to see more of those. So it's just, I guess, how glaring are those changes going to be? And I don't know that answer because I watched, I don't know, 6 offseason practices, and I'm not sure that I would say, oh my gosh, it looked completely different. Just, as I watched Watson, I tried to watch other things during practice.
All right, let's. The next one is Deshaun Watson enters a pivotal season. We'll come back to that because I'm going to ask you about an article you wrote with Watson. Health of Conklin, Wills, and Hines is the other one, and especially that offensive line. You know, Conklin and those tackles, they need to be full go.
Yeah, and I don't know if they will be day one, right? I think there's a chance all 3 of those guys, Conklin, Wills, and Hines, could start camp on the PUP list. Now, again, that doesn't mean a ton. It means they could practice day 2. Just they won't practice day 1. Conklin has posted some stuff on social media that seems encouraging, but you want to see him on the field. He was not out there during the offseason program. Either was Jedrick Wills. Now, we saw, for the end of, I think, minicamp, we saw Conklin doing some stuff like on the side. We saw Wills on the side throughout the offseason program. Hines, he was on the side. Now, he's coming off the ACL just like Conklin. His was last July. Conklin's was September. Wills had the MCL during the season. So they're all at different stages. But when you focus on that offensive line, it's tackle, right? It's a premium position. Now, I think you can assume that you have DeJuan Jones. He practiced during the offseason. That's one healthy guy. But you need that second one. And it feels like they're going to keep Jones at right tackle. You need Wells to be healthy at left tackle. And then Conklin would be a great insurance policy, is that third tackle off the bench. I know he's high paid, and I know he's a 2-time All-Pro, but he's had so many injuries. I don't know if you can count on him to be the starter unless something happens to Jones.
So you wrote an article, Deshaun Watson, great state heading into training camp. He calls the journey back to the field a blessing, and also pivotal year for him. I don't think anybody would argue that.
No, I don't think. I'm not even sure Watson would. I don't know if he's gotten that question directly. He got a long time before the season, but I mean, it's year 3, right? It's kind of that hump year of his 5-year contract. Getting paid a ton of money still. Hasn't been on the field enough. Hasn't played well enough when he's been on the field to say, okay, he's worth the contract. He was worth the draft picks. Yes, he's going to be the guy. I mean, that leads this team to where it wants to go. Now, we talk about this team having a Super Bowl caliber roster and ranking in the top, 2, 5, 10, whatever it is in the league. If you have a top 10 roster in the league, and I think most people would agree the Browns do, then it's on the quarterback to get you into the playoffs, right? And to make a run into the playoffs, especially when you're a 3-time Pro Bowler like Watson, especially when you're a first-round pick, when you're getting paid the money he is, all those things that Deshaun Watson brings with him. And it feels like it's time for him to deliver. I don't think the shoulder's an excuse. Coming off that surgery, he's looked good. He says he feels good. He says he's in a great state. So it's all about him going out there and proving that he's the guy. And can he win games? Can he win division games? Can he compete against the Mahomes and Burrows and Jacksons of the AFC and give this team a chance to make a run? Because the roster's good. Browns gave him a new coordinator. They've given him weapons. They've protected him up front. It feels like it's on him to take this team to the next level.
So this one's from your mailbag as well. Do you think the Jerry Jeudy extension impacted the Amari Cooper negotiations at all?
I do. I don't think it's the number one thing, right? I think it's the skyrocketing receiver contracts. Cooper watches Jefferson signed for $35 million and Waddle signed for a ton of money, right? And all of a sudden, Cooper's tied for 20th in the league in receiver compensation. And he looks around, he goes, I'm better than that. I'm a Pro Bowler. I had career high 1,250 yards last year. So I think the contracts at the position are the number one reason. I think the leverage that he feels he has. He's entering the last year of his contract. There's no guarantees. I mean, he'll get paid this year, right? Because he's under contract. But there's no guarantees this year even. There's no guarantees beyond. I think he looks at it as, hey, I just turned 30. This is kind of might be my last chance to get really big money that might not even be there in March if he plays out the season. So I think those are the biggest factors. But, I don't think he can ignore Judy getting a contract for $50 million, the contract extension for $50 million, when there is a finite salary cap, right? There's only so much money to play at a position. I think you could make a reasonable conclusion that some of that money probably was taken out of money that could have been paid to Cooper.
Well, the other thing I would imagine is Andrew Berry, if you knew the wide receiver market was going to blow up, he had a pretty good idea that's why he signed him to the extension. You had to realize that at some point you're going to have to deal with Amari Cooper. I don't think this is a surprise to Andrew Berry.
Yeah, I mean, you're probably right. I do think the hope was that he played out the fifth year and then they'd figure it out, right? I mean, and maybe that still is the hope. Maybe Berry says, hey, he's under contract for this year. He's not going to not play this year, right? And you're talking about leverage. Maybe the Browns feel they have the leverage and they hold the cards. Now, that could get tricky, like I mentioned, could create animosity. You don't want that. So I think the Browns hoped that his contract would play out. Like, it happens all the time with free agents. Not everybody gets an extension, right? But Cooper, I think, is so valuable that he feels like he can stake his claim to one, and the Browns might have to cave. But even if the Browns saw this coming, I think they hoped that they could have him play out his contract and then figure out the future of the receiver position, after the season.
Yeah, that's probably very fair. The one thing that I would say, can you remember Andrew Berry? This front office, and maybe I don't think there's ever been a contract negotiation. I mean, I think even back to the Odell Beckham thing. They could have hardlined Beckham. They released, they bought him out. They released him. He's pretty good at finding a way to not make it, a problem with negotiations.
He is. The Beckham situation is interesting because, Beckham wanted his way out and how they handle that. The two that I come back to are, when David Njoku wanted to trade, the Browns said no.
Yeah.
And they played hardball, and Njoku didn't have a ton of leverage, and he had to play, and now he turned into a Pro Bowler and, one of the linchpins on this team. And then Kareem Hunt tried to hold in, and the Browns were like, hey, you have no leverage. We're not going to trade you. And, Hunt went back to work. So I feel like this is slightly different because Cooper has more leverage than those other guys. He has more value to the team than those other examples.
Yeah, I would agree wholeheartedly. Scott Patrick and I are going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Other side of the break, we'll head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason, talk a little bit more about some names to listen out for and pay attention to in training camp. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, toast, Skrilla, chips, bread and mold, cheddar, butter, lewd and scratch. Find the letters, make a match. Lettuce, gravy, game on the back for $30. That's a wrap. There's many words for cash, no doubt, but there's only one $30 cash word. Check it out. Cash word from Ohio Lottery. It's $30 show. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions in prizes, don't you know?
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. Let's head to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hi, guys. This is Jim from Rochester. A couple of people on your show had said about Mr. Stepanski that they don't know why he disciplines the way he disciplines, but the locker room responds to him. Well, has anybody ever heard that the team takes on the personality of the coach? He never says anything to anybody. And don't tell me that he's in the locker room yelling, because he don't. You need discipline. I said it once. I'll say it again. He's got to give up that billboard in front of his face and concentrate on the full team. Okay? Take care, guys. See you. Bye.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, and Jim, you and I disagree. We know this. I would say they did take on his personality last year. It was 4 quarterbacks. They found a way to win. He's not going to, and nobody, I won't say nobody, very few coaches sit there and scream at players in this day and age because guys are making $100 million, and they don't respond to that anymore.
Yeah, and you don't do it publicly, right? You don't want to belittle guys. That doesn't go over well at all. And I remember, you hear stories about coaches doing that, and some guys just don't take that, and it bothers them. So, I have no doubt in my mind that Stefanski has a toughness to him, that if he needs to discipline a guy, he will. If he needs to yell at somebody, he will. You got coaches on your staff that yell, right? Jim Schwartz is a yeller. Bubba Ventrone's a yeller. I don't think everybody needs to be a yeller. And, I think it's interesting when you talk about taking on his personality, the fans want outward emotion. And that's not Stefanski, but it's not a lot of guys. I don't think you see Andy Reid getting worked up all the time. I know you don't see Bill Belichick getting worked up on the sideline a lot, right? Every once in a while you do, but that's not who he is. I don't think that's a lot of who many great coaches are. And Stefanski, I think if you talk about taking on his personality, it's being smart. It's being disciplined. It's overcoming adversity, all the things that team did a year ago and pretty much throughout his tenure. So I just disagree with the caller. And, I think Stefanski's going to be here for a long time. And I think he deserves to be that, to be here. And you've seen him make progress as a coach, and I think you've seen his team make progress under him.
And we'll see, he may very well give up play calling duties. We'll see. I don't know that I would if I was him, but that's going to be a decision he makes. All right. You wrote an article about training camp preview players to watch as well. Deshaun Watson, we've talked a little bit about. We want to see kind of the structure and how that rehab continues. I'm guessing that's what you were getting at with Watson.
Yeah, that was part of it. And it was all what we talked about. Just what a big year it is for him. Does he feel the pressure? That kind of thing. And when is he at 100%? Does day one he take every rep? Does he take days off still? Right. At some point, I think we'll be past that, but you still have to monitor it.
Jeremiah Usu-Koromoa, that's another one. And we've heard various reports that they have there's a little bit of a difference between the number that JOK wants in an extension and a new contract and what the Browns are thinking. Plenty of time to get there, though.
Yeah, if there weren't a difference, then we'd have a contract extension announced by now, right? I just don't see any way that JOK doesn't get an extension. The Browns traded up to draft him in the second round at a position that they don't usually spend a ton of resources at. They're not going to let the guy walk out the door 4 years after he's been here without a second contract, especially after the breakthrough year he had last year, Pro Bowl, 20 tackles for loss. So I think it's just a matter of when JOK gets it. Now, it could be tomorrow, right? It could be Thursday before the first practice of camp. Maybe it's before week 1. Maybe it's December, November, like Grant Delpit when he got his extension. But I think it'll come, and I think it'll come before, free agency next year.
Myles Garrett's another one. What are you thinking with Garrett?
Well, I was putting that list together, and I almost didn't include Garrett just because he's such a given to me, right? He's going to be great. He's going to get a bunch of sacks. He's coming off Defensive Player of the Year. But he's still, he's arguably the team's best player, right? And he should be on this list. And to me, the question is, number one, what does he do for an encore coming off the first Defensive Player of the Year? Does that free him up? Do the additions to the defensive line and the retentions to the defensive line allow Garrett to go to a next level, especially statistically? And then it's for him, and I believe him. I think at some point his attention shifted from Defensive Player of the Year and kind of per individual goals to team goals. And I think it's been a couple years now, or a few years. And he talks about the Super Bowl and how important it is to bring one to Cleveland, at least one to Cleveland. And I think he's got a chance this year, right? If things go right, the Browns should be in that discussion. And that drives him. And I think that's an important thing to talk about heading into this season because he's such a good player, but it goes beyond that for him.
Jedrick Wills Jr. is another one. It's a guy that we talked a little bit coming off an injury. I'm curious to see, is there a difference with Andy Dickerson, the new offensive line coach? Sometimes, and Bill Callahan is one of the best offensive line coaches that has ever coached offensive line in the NFL. Sometimes a different voice for different guys works.
Yeah, that's an interesting point, Dave, and you could be right, and maybe it does. I think Callahan was more of it. We talked about yellers. He was more of a screamer, right? He held guys accountable, which obviously you need to do, but you can do it in different ways. And I think Dickerson just has a different personality, different vibe to him. Maybe that will get the most out of Jedrick Wills. The other part of the situation with Wills this season is he's also in the last year of his contract. The Browns picked up that fifth-year rookie option, and it doesn't feel like they're close to an extension. Now, I don't know that, but if I'm the Browns, I want to see more out of Jed Wills, right, before you commit big money. And we're talking, guards are getting $20 million, right? Left tackles are getting at least that, and we're not talking the top of the market left tackles. So there's no way the Browns, I don't think, are ready to commit top of the market left tackle money to Jed Wills. And they need to see more out of him. If he comes out and plays at a Pro Bowl level this year, then maybe they say, hey, we got our guy at left tackle. And then they decide to make that long-term commitment, which would make sense. He was a number 10 pick in the draft. We just haven't seen enough, and I don't think they've seen enough to make that commitment yet, which is why this is such a key year, because it's a premium position, right? And you can say, okay, maybe just slide DeJuan Jones to left tackle for 2025, and maybe you do, but then that opens a big hole at right tackle, right? So that's why Wills is important, and this is an important year for him.
And then Jerry Jeudy and Cedric Tillman, and we'll talk a little bit about Cedric Tillman after this, but Jeudy and Tillman, take us through those two.
Yeah, I mean, the importance gets ratcheted up if there's any kind of issue with Cooper, right? Cooper's not there, or they decide to trade Cooper, whatever, right? If there's an lingering issue with Cooper, then Jeudy and Tillman become more important. But even with Cooper, he needs help. He needs support. You're trying to do all you can for Deshaun Watson. You're going to play 3 and 4 receivers. You need those guys to have an impact. They spent big money on Jeudy, right? They traded for him, gave him that extension. He needs to play like a legit number 2. He needs to play better than he has at any time with the Broncos. So that's a big question mark. Cedric Tillman, the Browns are relying on him. I think he's going to take some of Elijah Moore's snaps as that third receiver. I think he's going to be out there a good amount, but he needs to show he deserves that playing time. And the only way to do that is by producing. And we saw glimpses last year, but not enough.
So from your mailbag, do you think he can progress this season? And was the playbook his main issue last year?
I think it was. And I don't know if it's as simple as he didn't know the playbook. There's a lot of nuances to the NFL and NFL offensive systems and to playing that receiver position. So just because he ran some wrong routes, I don't think that means, he wasn't prepared. I think that happens to rookie receivers. But it can't keep happening, right? And it can't happen in year 2. It can't happen if you're going to be the number 3 receiver or even the number 4, right? If you're going to get a lot of playing time, the quarterbacks have to trust you and have to trust you to be in the right spot. But to me, that was the issue for him last year. We saw strong hands on occasion. We saw physicality, run after catch. The size is obvious. It's that be in the right spot at the right time and don't turn what should be completions into incompletions or, God forbid, interceptions, like happened on occasion last year.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I think it's nuanced, and it has to do with playing in college and being so much more talented than the guy covering you. And now you're in the NFL, and you saw it. There's a time when you want to break off a route and go towards the back of the end zone. There's a time when you better be in front of the defender when you're breaking off a route, and those are nuanced things that the other thing I'll say about him, Scott, he can block. You saw that. You saw him blocking linebackers in the run game, and that to me screams he's going to get time in the red zone. He's going to get time in this offense if you spread it out.
Yeah, that's a good point. And, he came from a simplistic offense at Tennessee, and I think that added to the learning curve for him. And then he didn't play a bunch, early, and then they trade Donovan Peoples-Jones, and then he's forced into the rotation. They wanted him to be forced into the rotation, but that's another adjustment for a rookie. So yeah, I think you can throw all that into the pile when it comes to him. But I'll tell you this, the Browns are expecting big things from him, and they think it can happen starting this year.
Scott Petrek, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. And I'm going to step aside, take a quick time out. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason when we return. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrek, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram, as well as BrownsZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Yes, this is Carl calling from Rochester, New York. I just want to comment on if you think Ken Dorsey's offense is going to be any different. Well, again, offense will not be different because we have Coach Stefanski. You guys said that last year, that we were going to do this, we were going to do that, we were going to be more wide open, and we weren't. I wouldn't turn around and say the 5 different quarterbacks made a difference, because it does not. We should do the same thing whether we have this quarterback or that quarterback. It all comes down to Stefanski, and we'll be the same as we were last year. Thanks.
As always, appreciate all the voicemails. Scott, here's what I would say to that. When you got Joe Flacco, you weren't going to make it much different because Kevin Stefanski's offense is designed for Joe Flacco. I think they were trending towards being more wide open last year, and then Nick Chubb got hurt. And now you're in scramble mode. That was second game of the year. To his point, though, here's what I come back to, and I said it earlier in this show. Why do you change the entire offensive coaching staff if you're going to do the same thing?
Yeah. No, I hear you. I don't think it's fair to the caller to say the quarterback doesn't matter with how the offense is run. I just don't think that's true. And I think we saw a change early in the season, and I felt like it was more wide open, and it was more catered to what Deshaun Watson wanted to do. And then Watson gets hurt week 3 and misses time, and then he comes back and he's out again, and then you go to Flacco, and you can't call the same. You can't call RPOs. You can't call quarterback options with Joe Flacco, right? You can't go quarterback run with Joe Flacco, and those are some things you did with Deshaun Watson. Flacco's best at the play-action game that Kevin Stefanski grew up in. So that was a natural fit. But I think if we had seen Watson for 17 games last year, you would have said, yes, the offense had evolved from where it was in 2020, 21, 22. And I think Stefanski is flexible enough to give up some control of that offense, and at least to invite new opinions and new voices. And that's why you have Ken Dorsey and Deuce Staley and Tommy Rees and all the new coaches they added on the offensive side of the ball, because he wants some more new influences to make the passing game more explosive, to make it more friendly to Deshaun Watson, to add college elements. So I think you will see those. Now, like we said, I don't know how different it's going to look, but I do think Stefanski is willing and wanted to change the offense to some degree. And if he hands over play calling duties, then I certainly think we're going to see a lot more changes than if he continues to call the plays just with, more input from Dorsey and the other guys.
And the caller's criticism of me saying that is fair. I thought the offense would look – it doesn't make sense to me to go out and trade what you traded and pay Deshaun Watson what you're paying him to not play to his strengths. And his strengths are shotgun. Let me find matchups. Let's exploit matchups. And the Browns have Njoku, who can exploit a matchup. Judy's pretty good at that. Cooper's. You have an offense where you should be able to find a weak link on the defense and just beat that weak link repeatedly.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure that's what they're trying to do, but I do think they tried to take a step in that direction last year, and I think the injuries are a big part of it. Maybe it was Alex Van Pelt, didn't have that same background that Ken Dorsey does, right? Dorsey worked with Cam Newton, he worked with Josh Allen. He feels like a better fit for Deshaun Watson, so that's why I think we will see an evolution. And you're right, and I think the Browns would be the first to say that yes, they need to give Deshaun Watson the offense that suits him best, and that's all that makes sense. But it was tough to do that in 2022, when he was suspended for the first 11 games.
Yep.
And it was tough to do that with him on the sideline last year.
Yeah, and keep in mind, I'm sure Nick Chubb was a big part of that offense that they were planning, and he got hurt really early in week 2 against the Steelers, down for the season. All right, this is from your mailbag. When you look at the Browns roster, do you think this offense is run-heavy, balanced, or will it be skewed more towards throwing it?
Yeah, I mean, that plays into what we've been talking about. I think it's gonna tilt more toward the passing game. I have a hard time believing any offense or any team led by Kevin Stefanski is going to ignore the run. And I don't think you can do that in this climate. I don't think you do that in this division. So are they going to come out and go, 5 wides and throw it 90 times a game? No. However, I think early in games we'll see more passing. And maybe they and the hope would be they get the lead and then they can turn it over to the run game later, right? Go more runs and passes in third and fourth quarter, kill the clock, be able to possess the ball. But I'm working under the assumption that with all the changes that they are going to tilt more toward the passing, but it's not going to be, I don't think, an extreme. We're not going to look at the run and shoot.
No, the one thing I would say, if you're in shotgun and you're in 4 wides, you should have some lighter boxes to run out of. Right. That would be if you're drawing it up on the board. That's how I think you'd be drawing this offense up on the board.
I agree. I think, like I said, I don't think they're going to get away from the run. I do think they'll pass more, but even when they run, it will probably look different than it did. Maybe not every snap, right? I mean, they're not going to abandon 2 tight ends. They'll have short yardage packages, but the majority of plays, my guess would be, will run from 3 wides, which changes the defensive look, which changes the angles, all those things. So even the run game, I think, will look different.
All right, this is from the Bleacher Report. Best and worst case scenario for each of the NFL divisions. For the AFC North, best, Battle Royale Part 2. That would be, what went on last year. And the worst, they say, big-name quarterbacks crumble. I think big-name quarterbacks crumbling. I think the Browns, I think they can win games with Jameis Winston and Tyler Huntley. I think they're that loaded at the quarterback position, but I expect this division, it's the best in football, and I don't think it's really even close.
I'm with you there. I think what we'll see in this division, and the Bleacher Report mentioned that the Ravens clinched it early last year. I don't think you're going to see, and I think they won 13 games. I don't think you're going to see a team win 13 games. I don't think you're going to see a team in the division win 12 games. I think the first to 11 is going to win the division, and then there's going to be a fight to get to 10 and get a wild card spot, and maybe you get lucky like Pittsburgh did last year and get a wild card spot with 9 wins. That's how it feels to me. I think the Ravens are going to take a step back just because it's hard to win 13 games in this league. It's really hard to do it in a division like this. And then when they talk about the quarterbacks crumbling, to me, that's Lamar gets hurt, Joe Burrow gets hurt, Russell Wilson looks like Russell Wilson, right? Like looks like Russell Wilson of late. And then Watson either gets hurt again or doesn't play, doesn't live up to who he was in Houston. And those are all possible. And if that happens, then the division changes. The dynamics inside the division change. But if every quarterback stays healthy and plays pretty well, then it's going to be a lot of knockdown dragouts, and I think you're going to see teams bunch from 8 to 11 wins.
The other thing is, remember, the Ravens have a new defensive coordinator again. So that matters without question. Scott Petrick and I are going to take one more time out on the side of the break. Back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. A little bit more about training camp as well. Sports for CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program is dedicated to recognizing exceptional students, teachers, and schools throughout Ohio. Scan the QR code on screen to nominate students and teachers as Academic All-Stars and Teachers of the Month. They must be currently enrolled or teach in grades K through 12. Is your K through 12 school developing students' literacy skills to achieve success in reading? If so, you can nominate your school for the School of the Year. Students can win $100, teachers can win $500, and schools can win $2,500. Scan the QR code, fill out the forms, and nominate deserving students, teachers, and schools today. The Ohio Lottery Partners in Education program takes pride in honoring exceptional students, teachers, and schools across Ohio. Submit your nomination today. It's fun, fast, and free. We continue talking Browns with Scott Petrick, Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram as well as BrownZone.com. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
And sometimes you have to look at the past in order to strive in the future. I think you go into a season with DTR and PJ Walker. Now let's look at this year. You have Amari Cooper that's not signed yet, and moreover, a new offense with two different new quarterbacks. It just sounds like last year. We overachieved last year. We set a record with 5 different quarterbacks. So now it's like a carbon copy. You don't know what to expect. It's surely a learning curve, but I still see the same blueprint. I feel like it's a blueprint for failure. So I'll become a farm system and get rid of all the players and start over again. That's my perspective.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails, Scott. I think the one thing you're overlooking is the defense returns pretty much everybody and added a couple. So the defense should be really good and give the offense a little bit of time to ease into the transition there.
Yeah, it should. I mean, there's some negativity coming off a playoff season last year. I think they're better at quarterback this year. Now, you could argue the Jameis Winston, Joe Flacco, and I get it. I get what Flacco did at the end of last year. But Flacco wasn't here last July, August, September. So I think Jameis Winston is better than DTR was, right? I mean, I think that's a no-brainer. I think Tyler Huntley is probably better than DTR was last year. So I think the Browns have better depth. I think they prepared themselves if something happens to Watson. I don't know if they can win 10 or 11 games with Winston Huntley, but I think they're in a better spot at the quarterback position from a depth perspective, certainly, than they were going into camp last year.
All right, this is from your mailbag. Who do you think player is most likely to be traded before the season starts?
Yeah, I thought this was a tough one. I wound up going Siaki Ika, and the reason was they have a lot of depth at D-tackle. And I feel like Dalvin Tomlinson, Maurice Hurst II, Shelby Harris, and Mike Hall Jr. are locks to make the roster. Let's assume everybody's healthy. So that leaves one spot, because I don't think they're keeping more than 5 D-tackles. So then you have Quentin Jefferson, who they went out and signed pretty early in free agency, a proven veteran that can rush the passer, versus Ika. And I get that Ika was a third-round pick last year. I also think that maybe after a year in the building and in the system, they decided he can't be the Ferrari that Jim Schwartz wants at D-tackle, that he's more of the dump truck, occupy 2 blockers, which the Browns don't ask their linemen to do. They want their linemen to attack. So let's say they go with Jefferson, then you have Ika. I think you can trade Ika and get something in return because he was a third-round pick. I think that carries some juice around the league. So not only do you have a surplus there, I think you could get something in return for Ika.
Yeah, that's fair. I could see that. Just a scheme thing that didn't quite work out the way you thought it would. Is there a position group that you think the Browns should aim to add depth to? And this again from your mailbag.
Yeah, I can't get away from tight end,
yeah.
Dave. And I know we talked about 3 and 4 receivers, so that changes the math, right? But, I mean, they have David Njoku, and then they have Jordan Akins, who didn't play, didn't have much production last year. He didn't practice a lot in training camp because he's got bulky knees, or at least a bulky knee. You get lost Harrison Bryant in free agency. You sign Giovanni Ricci, who's more of a fullback than a tight end. You got Zaire Mitchell-Payton, and maybe they expect him to have a breakout. And I've seen evolution in his game, but I just don't see a ton of depth there. And I feel like that, to me, that's the spot that cries out for another proven body.
Yeah, I don't think you could argue, and I wouldn't be surprised if they wait until cut down day when all these guys become available, as everybody has to get to 53. All right. Before I let you go, what are you paying attention to as you get ready to head to the Greenbrier and cover all that craziness when workouts get underway? What are you paying close attention to early? What is the most important thing to you as the Browns get ready for what they expect to be a playoff season and a run in the playoffs?
Yeah, that's interesting. Besides the traffic on 77 down to West Virginia, I think, to me, it starts with the injuries. I know we talked about them, but I mean, we got Amari Cooper situation, but it's the injuries. Who's ready to go? Who should we be worried about moving forward, or should the Browns be worried about moving forward? Where is Nick Chubb on his timeline? Is Deshaun Watson back to 100%, taking 100% of the reps, right? Like, I think those are the first things you pay attention to in camp. And then it shifts to how much does the offense change? How comfortable is Watson? Because he wasn't taking a bunch of team reps in the offseason program, right? Like, to me, at some point it'll shift to Watson/offense/Dorsey.
Yeah, and you know what? I don't know that we're going to see much of that offense. We may not be able to answer that until they get into, the preseason games.
Yeah, it's interesting. You watch practice and they try so many things, right? And they install things. It's tough to get a great grasp on that. And I certainly didn't in the offseason program. I'm hoping, 8 or 9 practices in West Virginia, and then you come back to Berea for however many there, and it'll be more clear, and where I can say, okay, this is going to be how they want to go into week 1.
Yeah, because they do have to work on. You still have to get timing down and those kind of things and all that. Scott Petrak, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Scott.
Thanks, David.
Scott Petrak, make sure you check him out. BrownsZone.com. Really good Browns coverage. He is also the Browns beat reporter for the Elyria Chronicle Telegram. We're going to step aside, take a quick timeout. Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. We continue talking Browns on Sports4CLE. Stay with us.
Come back to go forward. Back to learning new things. Back to pursuing your dreams. Tri-C has flexible learning options to fit your life. And every year, more than 1,000 local companies provide Tri-C students with real-world learning. The right education can boost your lifetime earning power by hundreds of thousands of dollars. Start now with a college education you can afford. Tri-C, where futures begin.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, toast, Skrilla, chips, bread and mold, cheddar, butter, lewd and scratch. Find the letters, make a match. Lettuce, gravy, game on the back for $30. That's a wrap. There's many words for cash, no doubt, but there's only one $30 cash word. Check it out. Cash word from Ohio Lottery. It's $30 show. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions in prizes, don't you know?
I am powerful beyond my wildest imagination.
I will define my future.
I will keep challenging myself to improve.
Because I am a future leader of this great nation.
I will be responsible for raising a beautiful family.
And educating not only my generation, but many more to come.
I will make a difference in my community.
And I will stand up for what I believe in.
I will not settle for simply chasing my dreams. I will achieve them.
Because I was given a chance.
An opportunity.
A home.
At Family, Career, and Community Leaders of America.
The ultimate leadership experience.
FCCLA has been one of the greatest experiences of my life.
It's made me who I am today.
Join us. We'll build a new future together.
We continue talking Browns on Sports for CLE. Let's head back to the voicemail of Truth and Reason.
Hey, Dave. Frank from Cleveland. One thing referring to Amari Cooper, talk with all the trade talk. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. Pay the man. God bless you, brother. Love you. You and the family be safe, and you'll be hearing from me.
As always, appreciate all of the voicemails. Let's welcome in Tim Bielek from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. Tim, assuming it's not $30 million, that they can find a reasonable increase and bump in pay, I agree. And you know what? I've said this, and I truly believe it. Andrew Berry has done a really good job of not pissing players off in negotiations, and I there's a skill to that and a talent to that, and I think it's important, especially when free agency and all those things. So I think he finds a way to finesse this and get it done.
Yeah, and I think that's in some ways kind of been what Andrew Berry's done. One of the good things he's done for the Browns is that it seems like he's really done his best to do right by the player and be fair and and not try to be too much of a hardliner as far as negotiations go. That said, with Amari Cooper, I think the person on the voicemail has a great point. Obviously, when you look at Amari Cooper's production in the 2 seasons he's had with the Browns, 2,400 plus yards, 14 touchdowns. And that's with a rotating group of quarterbacks because of, the suspension with Deshaun Watson in 2022, 2023. He has the injury. Dorian Thompson-Robinson is injured. You bring in Joe Flacco, 5 different starting quarterbacks, although Cooper didn't play in the last preseason game with Jeff Driscoll. But still, the fact that Amari Cooper has been as successful as he is with, such turnover at quarterback, especially largely because of injuries, the fact that he's been able to be as productive as he is despite the instability who's been available at quarterback, that's just a testament to his talent, and that talent's worth investing in. The only question mark is why you're uncertain why you're going to pay him and how much you're going to pay him is the fact that he is 30 years old.
So take a look at this. This is 2024 NFL training camp holdout predictions by CBS Sports. They feel Cooper reports to camp as a hold-in, so he doesn't get fined, doesn't miss things, but doesn't really go and take part in the practices. Cleveland figures to acquiesce to his demands in some fashion, looking to finally get the most out of Deshaun Watson, but it may take time. He could well follow the footsteps of Kareem Hunt, who attended 2022 camp while sitting out main portions of practice. I don't know about acquiesce. They just have to find, and we haven't heard. It's not like we've heard Amari Cooper banging the table saying, it's been very quiet. We've seen the reports that they have talked. So it's just finding the right spot that the Browns can live with that makes Cooper happy.
Yeah, it doesn't feel like from any of the reporting you see out there that it's super duper contentious, that, it just feels like they're just kind of trying to work on a number, like you said. And it seems like, that's just kind of the way Amari Cooper has been throughout his career. He really just goes about his business. He's not your typical receiver as far as personality is concerned. He's a more reserved guy than your typical hot number 1 receiver sometimes is. But I think with Cooper and the Browns, again, it just comes down to, can they find the number that's going to work for both parties? And as far as Cooper being a hold-in and showing up to camp and all those things, yeah, I could see that. That could make a lot of sense. I mean, because obviously you want to protect yourself as a player by not practicing. Do you have that extension that you want if you're Amari Cooper? But at the same time, still being there, still being with your teammates. And he's got a lot of young receivers still that he can help work with potentially as they continue to grow and evolve this offense under Ken Dorsey this season.
This one from the Bleacher Report, bold predictions for the 2024 season. They say Nick Chubb returns from his knee injury to lead the NFL in rushing. If Chubb opens the season as Cleveland's lead back with the more stabilized quarterback situation, fewer runners actually eclipsing the 1,100-yard mark, he can easily don his cap and cowl and regain his previous status as the best of the best. It'll be interesting to see. I don't have a good feel one way or another for if Nick Chubb will be ready to go from the get-go. I think he's further along than a lot of people thought he was, but contact on a surgically repaired knee and the wear and tear and grind of football, not sure that he's ready for that yet. That's one of the things that'll be interesting to see early in camp.
Yeah, I think that's a little bit of too bold in my eyes when it comes to Nick Chubb potentially leading the NFL in rushing. I mean, again, we don't know, like you said, when he's going to eventually be back, eventually for full contact and those sort of things. We kind of obviously have to let things play out. We're going to see how the Browns go about things. History has told us they are certainly very cautious when it comes to the health of their players with training camp and those sorts of things. So we kind of have to just wait and see how that's going to unfold. But I mean, if Nick Chubb were to somehow look like Nick Chubb 100%, especially in the first couple weeks of the season coming back off that knee injury, I mean, that would be beyond the best case scenario for the Browns. And even if he does come back, it still wouldn't shock me just because he is getting up there in age. You want to protect the knee a little bit. Even if he is back, if you still use some kind of running back by committee, obviously with Jerome Ford, Deontay Foreman, Naheem Hines, you have some veteran backs who have been there and done, had some relative success in the NFL. So like I said, if he somehow has a massive season in spite of that massive injury, I mean, that would just be absolutely incredible considering how severe that injury was. And even just the reaction in Pittsburgh of the Steelers fans chanting Nick Chubb's name after the injury on Monday Night Football, which is one of the most surreal things that I can remember, especially considering the Browns-Steelers rivalry. If he can come back from all that and somehow lead the NFL in rushing. And by the way, Christian McCaffrey, 1,459 yards last year to lead the NFL in rushing. Not as high in numbers we've seen in the past, but anywhere close to that, I think would be remarkable.
Yeah, I would agree. And the other thing is, I think they're going to throw the ball more than they have in the past. We'll see. Those are all questions that will play out as this training camp and season go along. Tim Bielik from cleveland.com, Plain Dealer, and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. Other side of the break. Reasons for hope for the Browns in 2024. Reasons for concern. Sports4CLE. I'll be right back. Stay with us.
Cash, moolah, greenbacks, toast, Skrilla, chips, bread and mold, cheddar, butter, lute, and scratch. Find the letters. Make a match. Lettuce, gravy, game on the back for $30. That's a wrap. There's many words for cash, no doubt, but there's only one $30 cash word. Check it out. Cash word from Ohio Lottery. It's $30, yo. Cash word, it's fun to go with millions in prizes, don't you know?
We continue talking Browns with Tim Bielik from the Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. This one's from ESPN.com. They did reasons for hope and reasons for concern for each team. For the Browns, reasons for hope. Browns have a deep roster headlined by one of the best overall players in the game in Myles Garrett, a two-time Coach of the Year in Kevin Stefanski, who proved he could engineer success even when things fall apart at the quarterback position. Deshaun Watson hasn't looked right since he got to Cleveland. He's still only 28 years old. So it's not absurd to think that he still might turn it around. All those things are very true. And Tim, every time I come back to Deshaun Watson, I say this, nobody's been able to tell me, and Deshaun Watson has not had a debilitating career-ending injury. I haven't been able to find a quarterback who has been a three-time Pro Bowler early in his career who then falls off the face of the earth and can't perform like a elite quarterback unless they've been significantly injured. Deshaun Watson hasn't been significantly injured, and I got to believe he gets back to playing at least, top 10 quarterback if he stays healthy.
Yeah, and that might honestly be all the Browns really need to potentially make a deep playoff run this coming season, is if Watson's a top 10 quarterback. Even looking at his numbers, I've talked a lot about how it felt like the last 3 games he's really played start to finish. If obviously you take out the Colts game because he wasn't right for that game, he had back-to-back games of a quarterback rating of over 100 plus. Again, you take the old school quarterback rating with a grain of salt these days. The Baltimore game, obviously the pick 6 on the first play hurt that rating. It was only 74.8, but he had the perfect second half, literally in terms of completion percentage, 2 touchdown passes, and he really got that team going back on track, or 1 touchdown pass in Baltimore, I beg your pardon, but still, the fact that he had that perfect second half to lead that comeback, and that was the last we kind of heard of him, unfortunately, for the Browns because of his injury. it should be a more promising thing going forward. Obviously, he's got to be able to stay on the field. We've talked about that a bunch, that he's got to find a way to protect himself from those big hits more often. But it seems like based on how he threw at minicamp, how his arm looks more normal than I think maybe some people anticipated. I think that's a positive sign. We'll have to kind of see, obviously, how the Browns handle Watson in training camp as far as, if he has a pitch count, if they're going to be patient with him, which, again, like I said earlier, considering how cautious they are with injuries, I would not be shocked if that's the play there. But if Watson's relatively healthy, able to string games together, like you said, no reason he can't get back to, or at least close to, that 3-time Pro Bowl form in Houston.
All right, so same article, reasons for concern for ESPN. They say the ultimate upside of this organization rests squarely on the shoulders of Watson since arriving in Cleveland in 2022. He's played in 12 games, completing just 59.8% of the throws, 14 touchdowns, 9 interceptions. Although the team went 5-1 in 6 games he did play last season, Watson has to be available first and foremost and elevate his play to justify guaranteed money and structure that has never been seen before in an NFL contract. 5-1 in 6 games matters. Is it a quarterback stat? I don't really give a damn if it is or it isn't. You want a quarterback that the team feels they can win with. 5-1 in 6 games, to me, says they can win with them. It doesn't matter about the stats. We're not playing fantasy football. They're trying to get wins.
Yeah, I think, obviously we could talk about that Colts game. Obviously, he played a quarter and he did not look good in that quarter. And of course, he had the injury and he didn't even finish he barely got out of the first half. He barely finished the first quarter, I think, before he got injured. So I kind of throw that out. So in the 5 games he really played start to finish, 4-1 as a starter. The only game he really played terribly in was the Pittsburgh game. And like I said last week, they still had a chance to win that game with a drive in the final minutes. And yeah, wins are not necessarily a quarterback stat, but if you look at the games Deshaun Watson played, some of them he didn't play the prettiest games in. The Bengals game was not a pretty one. He had a bad interception. And then the Ravens game, obviously the pick 6 to start the game. But in all 4 of those games, he made enough plays to win those games. It wasn't like he had a 4 interception game and the team ran for 200 yards and won in spite of the quarterback. Deshaun Watson made plays in all 4 of those games to win the football game. And I think there's something to be said for that in my mind. And Louis Riddick there does say, obviously Deshaun Watson's got to stay healthy and he's got to stay available. I think that's the obvious thing, is he has to be able to be out there for, more than 3 or 4 games in a row. We're talking 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, possibly at least 10 before we can really gauge, if he's back or whatever his status is going forward.
Yeah. And here's the thing, the guaranteed money in the NFL, they did that to get him to agree to come and take the trade. He had a no trade. He waived the no trade. I'm done talking about the guaranteed money. They did it. They're going to have to live with it. That's fine. It's not my money. But the point you made is extremely valid. Did he make enough plays to win the game? That's the definition of a franchise quarterback. Games on the line, are you making enough plays to win? That's what they went out and got him for.
Yeah, and you would imagine this season with the Browns having a tougher schedule of quarterbacks to go against if Deshaun Watson's healthy, you would expect to see quite a few quarterback duels, and Watson, hopefully for the Browns, rising up to the challenge of some of the great quarterbacks he's going up against and proving to, the NFL world that he's still among those types of quarterbacks.
All right, before I let you go, training camp starts Thursday. What are some of the important things you're paying attention to early in camp?
Biggest thing for me is the offensive line, and specifically the state of the offensive tackles. With Jedrick Wills Jr., DeJuan Jones, Jack Conklin, all coming off season-ending injuries last season. Who's healthy and ready to go, early on? Obviously, Scott Petrak was talking about injuries. Obviously, coming into training camp, it's going to be very interesting to see, who's close to 100%, who's available, and all those sorts of things. I think what's going to be interesting is if any of these guys are not available to go early, particularly Jedrick Wills Jr., what they do at left tackle, if it's a prolonged thing, or even if Wills is ready to go, because you would assume if he's ready to go, he's left tackle, and then what happens at that second starting spot at right tackle? Is Jack Conklin going to get it because he's the veteran and because he's had obviously he's a much more proven player, or will DeJuan Jones, who was really good, thrust into the starting lineup as a 4th-round rookie and playing very well prior to his injury, does he get the nod? It's a fascinating thing that we're going to watch. We've talked about it for months, kind of 3 starters for 2 spots on this offensive line, and essentially one of them is going to become your new swing tackle. So where they go, how that kind of sets up in the beginning is really going to be extremely intriguing to me. We know just how depleted this offensive line got at tackle last year. It really played itself out towards the end of the season, especially in the game against the Texans in the playoffs. If those guys are ready to go early, that's going to be huge for the Browns, especially with a chance to jump out to a fast start with a weaker schedule at the beginning outside of the opener against the Cowboys.
Yeah, that start to the season is going to be crucial just because of the way the season ends, how the schedule lines up. Tim Bielek, Plain Dealer, cleveland.com. As always, great stuff. Appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Tim.
Yeah, thanks for having me, guys. Have a good day. Tim
Bielek, make sure you check him out. Always really insightful stuff for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. That's going to do it for this edition of Sports for CLE. We'll see you back here tomorrow at 4 o'clock. Have a great night, everybody. See you tomorrow at 4 on Sports for CLE.